Okay, so today we're going deep on, all this stuff happening with the financial markets after President Trump implemented those tariffs.
Yeah.
We've got reports from Monday, April 7th, 2025, breaking down like the immediate stock market reactions and all the, the chatter around these pretty big trade policy changes.
For sure.
And the goal for you listening is to really try and get what's the immediate economic impact? What are the main arguments, both for and against this new direction?
Right.
Right. So
I think that the main story this week is really the stock market and how much it's dropped.
yeah.
Reports from Monday show that the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell something like 1,400 points.
Wow.
Which is a 3.5% drop.
Yeah.
And the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ Composite weren't too far behind, both seeing around a 3.7% decrease when the market opened.
Yeah.
And, this wasn't entirely unexpected because throughout last week we saw stock prices kind of trending downwards after the tariffs were announced.
Right. And I think the scale of these tariffs is what really caught people off guard.
Yeah.
We're talking about $600 billion in new taxes on foreign goods.
Yeah, it's a huge number.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And some of these tariffs are as high as 54%, particularly on products coming from China.
Yeah.
It seems like the market was, maybe expecting a more measured approach.
Right.
Something focused on, maybe encouraging trade negotiations rather than, going all in with these really substantial tariffs.
Yeah.
And a 3.5% drop in the Dow Jones, that just sounds significant. Can you put that into perspective for us?
So a single day drop of that size for the Dow. It really shows, a lot of concern from investors and uncertainty, while it's not like a record-breaking crash,
right?
It's definitely a notable downturn, and it really reflects a strong negative reaction to the news.
Yeah.
And what I think is really fascinating is President Trump's, reaction to this.
Yeah.
He seems very firm in his stance, even with this market response.
Right.
He's basically saying that these losses are necessary.
Right.
It's like a short-term pain.
Yeah.
The medicine needed to fix what he sees as, unfair trade practices.
Right.
And the huge trade deficit with China that he says is costing the U.S., hundreds of billions of dollars each year.
Wow.
His main argument is that these tariffs will basically force American manufacturing to come back to the United States.
Right. It's a bold statement considering, all the immediate financial fallout.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've got the president's perspective on this is why he thinks it's necessary. But what are we hearing from other, big players in the financial world?
Well, that's the interesting part. We're starting to see some pretty notable concerns coming out.
Yeah.
Reports are highlighting how some in the financial industry are starting to change their tune.
Right.
Like, for example, Bill Ackman.
Right.
He's a big hedge fund manager who has supported the president's economic policies in the past.
Yeah. But now he's voicing some serious doubts on X. Yeah. Ackman's comments are definitely striking.
Yeah.
He's basically saying that the president is losing the confidence of business leaders across the globe.
Yeah.
And that carries a lot of weight coming from someone who, used to be a supporter.
Exactly.
He's also warning about some potentially severely negative consequences for the country.
Yeah.
Especially for lower income consumers who are already dealing with, economic pressures.
Absolutely. And, this brings up a really important question for all of us.
Right.
How to weigh, the president's stated long-term goals of fairer trade and boosting domestic manufacturing against, these immediate disruptions we're seeing in the stock market.
Right.
And the possibility of increased costs for everyday consumers, like Ackman pointed out.
Yeah.
It's a classic trade-off scenario, isn't it?
It is.
We're looking at potential benefits in the future versus challenges we're facing right now. And you have to think about the different ways this will impact various groups of people.
Yeah, it definitely gives us a lot to consider.
It does.
These initial market reactions and, these contrasting viewpoints, I think they give us a really critical snapshot of what the economic landscape looks like right now, right after these tariffs have been put in place. It really sets the stage for us to see how these policies are going to play out, in the coming weeks and months.
Exactly.
I think a big question is, what are the key indicators that we should be watching?
Yeah.
To figure out if this approach is actually working the way it's intended.
Right.
Or if those concerns that people like Ackman are raising are actually going to come true. That's something that we'll definitely keep a close eye on and keep you all updated on.
Absolutely.
So thanks for tuning in for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Really appreciate your insights.
Of course.
I think something that would be interesting for all of us to consider is, we've talked about the impact on the markets and consumers. Yeah. But what about the potential global ramifications of this?
Right.
How might other countries respond to these tariffs? Could this lead to a trade war or some sort of retaliation?
Yeah.
And if so, what would that mean for the global economy?
That's a great question.
Definitely something for us all to ponder as this situation continues to develop.
Absolutely.
Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Sounds good.